What is appropriation? Images always convey more or less than intended. Andy Warhol's soup cans. Appropriation, the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission. Like the appropriation of parish funds. Adrian Piper. Card. Art is about recognition, so it makes sense to use images that carry meaning. Jeff Koons. Found objects carry meaning. Marcel Duchamp's fountain. A pissoir. Appropriation uses images without permission. But it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Takashi Murakami. Here we have repetition of an image. Pop. Or alteration. The mashup brings the meaning. Found objects carry meaning. And this mashup, that's the place we're playing with. Here's Jonathan Yeo. And if we look close, we see Sarah Palin's portrait is made out of porn images. We have a mashup of scale, like Mark Lecky's Felix the Cat. In musical exchange, we riff off. And is it a cultural exchange? We have the act of call and response. A mashup of two cultures. Call and response in song. And protest. We say, tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. These images of the civil rights, I am a man, and how context changes. Sharon Hayes, I am a man. I am a man? Or Dred Scott, I am not a man? Am I not a man? Or Carrie Mae Weems, who owns imagery is a big question. Michael Harris, in Colored Pictures, Race and Visual Representation, says art is propaganda, espousing a position, an aesthetic, an approach to life, or something of the sorts. Images always convey more or less than intended. And they tell the story of the artist, the society within which he or she creates, and what expression is permissible or encouraged therein. Images very often carry more or less than intended. Here, Hank Willis Thomas, an advertisement for syrup. And he simply removed the words. And we have Joe Frazier showing his fist with a blue bonnet. The society within which he or she creates, and what expression is permissible. Or Billy D. Williams, an advertisement for hair products with the words removed. A comment on American expectations of race and masculinity. Recreated without a body and dressed in what some people would call African printed cloth. But the history of this is strange and mixed, often produced in Germany and printed in Southeast Asia. Sometimes these names and labels are misconstructions, assimilations. Or we have acculturation. These are Cyclone B gift sets. Gift gas is the German for poisonous gas by Tom Sachs. Cyclone B cartridges used in the Holocaust. Who owns imagery, especially pop culture? Appropriation of imagery is inevitable, but we must be aware of what is cultural appropriation, acculturation, assimilation, or cultural exchange. Also Michael Harris from Colored Pictures. Also Tom Sachs. Also Tom Sachs. Acculturation is the assimilation to a different culture, typically the dominant one. Assimilation is the absorption and integration of people, ideas, or culture into a wider society or culture. Zbigniew Libera, Auschwitz Lego Systems. Cultural exchange, the sharing or exchange of ideas, information, gifts, clothing, or handcrafts. Which brings me to the notion of the culture jam, placing objects into recirculation. Artist unknown. Or the Yes Men, placing these on newsstands. A few of their little trickeries. Or the Anarchist Action Figure by Packer Jennings. Cultural exchange is inevitable. There are efforts made to deal with these objects as images in ways beyond historical exploration and documentation, to ask who we are not rather than who we are. As Michael Harris also says, intention, or the imposition of transformative concepts and languages, does not completely overcome the foundations or etymology of demeaning imageries and derogatory terminology, because images always convey more or less than intended. As Michael Harris also says, art is propaganda. Espousing a position, an aesthetic, an approach to life, or something of the sorts. Silvio Mireles, redistribution of Coca-Cola bottles. He printed Yankees Go Home. And put them back into distribution. Yankees Go Home. Project 1, Coca-Cola. Otsang To, Mal Quaker Oats. Cultural exchange? Assimilation? Acculturation? It is important to be aware of your position and place in history. Don't be afraid. There is a necessity to walk borders, and you may offend someone. Here, Del Monte tomatoes, combined with the legacy in Guatemala of Jose Fran Rios Montt, the dictator. who worked with American companies to exploit the labor of his own people. A little close up. Pure murder. Pure murder. Or Obey, combined with Andre the Giant, a clothing company. Off They Live, an action film, science fiction film about alien overlords. Barbara Kruger taking that text, taking that imagery. We don't need another hero. And Supreme stealing that imagery as if no problem. Appropriation and exploitation. That's the difference that we need to be aware of. Because there's always a cultural exchange, and who do these images belong to? David Hammond's The American Flag in red, black, and green. Faith Ringgold, The American Flag, Die. Sarah Rabar, The American Flag, Piece Together, a piecemeal. The National Rifle Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NRA and the NAACP mashed up. New South. Who owns the Robert E. Lee battle flag? Who owns the legacy of the South and of slavery? Who owns the legacy of slavery? Hank Willis Thomas, Afro-American Express. We see the huddled humans being transported on a ship across the Atlantic. MasterCard, picking the perfect casket for your son, priceless, also Hank Willis Thomas. Glenn Ligon. Who owns these images, these people, individuals, and to what extent? Sam Durant's Scaffold. Of course, forgiveness is easier than permission. But intention and the imposition of transformative concepts and languages does not completely overcome the foundations or etymology of demeaning images and derogatory terminology. Sam Durant's Scaffold was set up in Minneapolis. And it's often about here at the Walker Arts Center. Because this scaffold depicts a scaffold where 38 Dakota men were hung for their war against the United States government. Not very far from Minneapolis. And Sam Durant and the Walker Museum did not take the time to discuss this with the Dakota Nation. And protest was necessary. It's about respect. Be aware of your position and place in history. Be aware, because images always convey more or less than intended.